Lines, and I'm a physical therapist. I also have my orthopedic clinical specialty, and I'm a mental performance coach. I work with athletes, mostly young athletes, middle school and high school, but I do also sometimes work with collegiate athletes, professional athletes, endurance athletes, and what I call the forever athlete, are, older folks that love to play their sports and want to play them forever. And I'm also a mental performance coach. So I help athletes mentally and physically to be able to perform at their peak, prevent injuries so they're not sidelined, and develop a really unstoppable mindset to help them really succeed both in their sport and in life. And you can find me at my website. I'll give you the short link. It's bit.ly/capital B, capital L, and then athlete in lowercase letters, ATHLETE. You can also find me on Instagram at DRLAURELPT. You can also find me on YouTube at dr.laurelpt.
Perfect. I'm going to put all of that in the descriptions because everyone, you need someone like Laurel in your life, because when I was an athlete growing up, I didn't have anyone besides my parents who were there for me. But one thing that I experienced growing up was my parents didn't actually come to any of my games except for one. And Laurel, let me tell you something. The one game they came to, guess what happened? We lost. We actually got blown out, even though I had a decent game and I was like, I want to be the best that I can be in front of my parents. Maybe if I had someone that was able to keep me motivated along the way, even though I wasn't getting that necessarily from the sources that you always want to, which is your parents, maybe I could have performed a little bit better. But for you, Laurel, take us from the genesis of this. What made you get involved in young athletes, specifically in regards to the areas that you're helping them with?
Yeah, so I had this experience when I was younger. I was a student athlete. I played varsity tennis, and I also won a national championship in competitive cheerleading in high school. And I had this experience where my parents were divorced, and my dad would sometimes pick me up late from practice, like 30 minutes late, 40, like an hour late. I'm standing there. I'm like mortified. I'm like, he doesn't love me. Like everybody else's parents love them, but my dad doesn't love me enough to pick me up and leave me here in the cold and the dark. And this is a little bit before cell phones. So I couldn't just call him up and be like, Dad, where are you? Get here now. So what I when I had this experience, I thought like, oh, if I was just better, then he would prioritize me and he would come pick me up on time. And so I'm like, okay, I went out to be better. So I did more and I did better and I succeeded and I accomplished and I continue to do that. And I continue to chase what I call the more monster. I kept chasing more and more and more. And I was never satisfied. Something was always missing. And I lived decades of my life like this until I actually discovered for myself that I was collapsing my sense of self-worth with my dad's, inability to manage his time with his love for me as well. So I collapsed all of these things. And what I did was, when I was able to uncollapse it, then I could deal with my self-worth. I could deal with my dad not having, strict time constraints around his time schedule and not managing that well. And then I could also deal with the fact that he really loves me. And when I collapsed all those things, it had me like live this life of chasing this more monster. But when I was able to uncollapse it, I could actually deal with what there was really to deal with in life. And I could deal with it really powerfully. And I know that I can generate my self-worth unrelated to my dad not managing his time well. And now I get to help young athletes to deal powerfully with this stuff without creating these experiences that create their life, without the self-worth or the confidence as they go into adulthood.
Was that something you had to learn sooner than later because you wanted to make sure that you had the value, or at least you appreciate the value for yourself that you always should have had?
Yeah, I wish I would have learned it sooner than later when I actually did. Um, you know, and through my journey, when I went to a physical therapy school, I really got presence and educated on how about pain and the pain science, and how pain is many times more of a mental, emotional experience than an actual physical experience. And in my practice, when I actually coach people around their pain while doing the physical therapy, there was way more benefits to their actual treatments. So when I started to discover some of this stuff for myself and start my own business and start training athletes, I realized how big this mental component was to sports, and how they succeed or they don't succeed, and how they actually develop into powerful young adults, or they don't. And sports is a really awesome place to learn a lot of life lessons, because really sports, whether it's individual or a team sport, it's really about going towards a common goal with a team. And that's what life is really about, is accomplishing common goals with other people. And you learn that so much more in sports than in the classroom. So I realized how important this teamwork, the mental performance, and all of these things that are there to be developed in a young athlete, and that can really set us up for success.
Sports for me was exactly how you described it. It was a sense of place where it was like an extended family for me, where when I was home with my mother and my father, or my brother and my sister, I was able to go to sports, and my coach was like an extension of both of my parents wrapped up in one. And I was very close with my coach, and I was very close with my team. And you have this like unified front. Like the locker room becomes like the dinner table, right? Like you can talk about anything in the locker room. And it made me feel like I can do anything. Whereas there's other times in my life where I wasn't as sure, right? So when I was able to get on that playing field, I was 100% confident in myself and 100% confident everyone around me. Outside that field, maybe not so much. Did you experience something like that when you were a young girl as an athlete, performing well and still trying to figure everything else out in the world?
So I coach people, parents and coaches around, like, as a parent, you're not going to be everything to your child. And as a coach, you can't be everything to the athlete. And it really does take a team to help our kids grow and develop into these powerful people that they are. And, you don't have to be everything to this kid, no matter if you're a coach or a parent. And, my experience whenever I was younger was that as an athlete, my mom was super supportive and always there and at the games and picked me up, on time. And then my dad wasn't there, but I was seeking, this relationship with more than one person. And my mom couldn't really be everything for me. And, I did want that team. I did want my dad to be there for me and my coaches. And yeah, so I think it's super important to have a team. And I also want to mention that, it's not just about the parents that aren't present, like my dad or your parents that really weren't showing up. What I've discovered in my practice is, I'll give you an example. I had a 10-year-old gymnast referred to me for some negative self-talk around her gymnastics. And she had this experience that my dad calls me a champion. And if I don't win the championship, then I'm not a champion. and then he's not proud, and then I don't know if he loves me. And then she goes out in the world, like there's so much pressure that she has to be a champion or she doesn't live up to this expectation of her dad. But her dad's supportive, loving, like you are a champion in my eyes. And in his eyes, like if she doesn't win the championship, he'll probably still think she's a champion. But this experience that she's creating is that there's pressure around this comment. And so you can be a really awesome parent and your kid can still experience these experiences. And we were able to she was able to generate like, hey, if I show up and do my best, then I'm proud of myself and my dad's proud of me and my coach is proud of me, and we transformed her relationship with failure. So if she doesn't win the championship, she has a new relationship to that, and how to take it to the next level the next time and still reap the rewards of being proud of herself and the love from the people around her in that, as a team.
What are some of the stumbling blocks maybe that parents and the athletes that you coach are facing in regards to keeping mentally and physically tough?
Yeah, so the world that we actually live in today is a really tough world for kids. And it's a tough world for us too, There's things that we have to deal with that we haven't dealt with before. For one thing, like, when do you give a kid a cell phone? Like, we didn't have to deal with that 20 years ago when there was no cell phones to give them, right? And with that said, there is an influx in information going into these young developing brains. And the developing brain looks outward and looks at this comparison to generate themselves and who they are in the world. And that's just how our brain works in this comparison. You get some feedback and then you process it and you compare things and judge things. And then, you become this person from this outside feedback. And so kids are getting so much feedback, they can't even process it, as quickly as they need to. They're looking outward for their sense of themselves and their self-confidence. And then they're also having to process not reality, but a lot of fantasy out there. On social media, sometimes things look a lot, happier and greener on the other side than they really are. So they're comparing themselves to these fantasies that are presented to them, but aren't really the reality. So I help kids to actually turn the focus inward and help them to navigate this whole world and this whole influx of information and be able to powerfully dissect and process the information overload that they're actually being faced with today in this world of technology.
For those who are watching along on YouTube and my social media, please stay tuned and subscribe and follow for more incredible interviews like the one we have with Laurel today. And we will be back for more. So